Well, good morning. Oh, glad to see everybody here. So you know the version of the question that I asked, right? Which is, what do we need to do to make Denver water better? What's the first thing we need to do, Usha? That's true, but to do that, what do we got to do? What do we have to learn how to do? Craig? We learn how to see waste. And so there's three words that we use when we're talking to people and they're telling us about a problem. Anybody know what those three words are? It's related to the answer to that question. Dave, what do you think? It's okay. So, and it's a bit of a trick question. You guys didn't know that was coming. Go and see. Go and see, right? So someone says, hey, I got this thing and it's happening. Let's go and see. Let's go see what's happening. And so whether it's someone at a plant had a maintenance issue, let's go see what's going on. If it's water quality, let's go see what's happening at the lab. Let's get our customers in and talk. And so that's what this report out is about. And with that, I'll return it over to Gene.
Okay, I'd like to invite the team up.
Good morning, and thank you for being here with us today. We had a very busy week. We had a rapid improvement event, one of several that came out of our earlier VSA. And the focus of this rapid improvement event was to understand the requirements and the needs of our customer, specifically treatment and environmental compliance. So here's the team, and unfortunately, Ezzy was absent a few days and missed picture day, and Rob was absent on picture day as well. I don't blame him though. Very busy week. But as it goes, that was the crew that did some great work. As you know, these events require many resources that aren't on the team, so this is a list of names of people that we reached out to. I'd like to call special attention to Jesse Park and Perry Hackwell. Those are our application support folks. We leaned on them very, very hard this week.
The reason for action, so this is what was just mentioned, this is what we've gone and what we've seen. So water quality performs some tasks in which the customer is not clearly identified. Without these clear requirements, water quality is unable to accommodate shifting priorities without negatively affecting customers. Oftentimes, water quality is left out on the forefront of planning and then expected to provide some kind of service. This impacts capacity and resources to accommodate last-minute demands. So the scope was to identify the routine work that water quality performs and to identify the customer that it performs this work. In this case, water treatment and environmental compliance.
So one of the first things we did was to define what the current state was. And with that, we did what's called a left brain, right brain exercise where one group will draw out what they see the current state as in a picture, and another group will list out the words that come to mind when they think of this relationship. The current state picture up here indicates water quality lab and environmental compliance. Well, plants and environmental compliance feeding into the water quality lab. Water quality lab is drawn there within a silo. Historically, there's been some siloing in the water quality lab, and things tend to move slowly from place to place. That's indicated by the snail there. Once samples are analyzed and ready for interpretation or consumption, they tend to go into one of several databases. That could be LIMS, Tableau, Splunk, several different areas that are difficult to access. Some of the words that were used to describe the relationship was random. Nothing was ever the same as far as requesting work or how work flowed from one entity to another. It was often confusing. People didn't know, right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing. Frustrating for all water quality lab and customers. But it was also mentioned that the water quality lab has always been very helpful and courteous and has always tried to accommodate everybody's request as best they could. From the plant side, we felt like pests, asking the water quality for lab data all the time by simple phone call no real process involved there. We don't want to bother the water quality lab. Everybody knows how busy they are, and so we neglected to follow through on some things because of that. And then there was, a question as to what does the water quality lab do? We've found several things where we know there's data that we didn't know about, both in the watershed and at our plants. So through this process, we've tried to identify what exactly the water quality lab is doing, highlight that things, and put the information out there for people to access.
Hi. The next group of people did a target state, and what we targeted, we wanted to where we wanted to go, how we wanted to get there, and why we wanted to get there. And like Ed said, break down a lot of these silos that were there, stopping people from getting information that they needed. One of the goals that we wanted to target was centralized data, the clear capabilities for the operators to get that data, and then connectivity, how can they request the data and stuff like that. You can request data through Workfront now. We identified centralized databases that people can go to quickly. What's that? No, one-stop shopping. So we can take the labs are ordering some stuff from the water quality lab. Now the labs themselves can take over and just order stuff like that. Well, that was one of the targets we wanted. No longer for a middleman on ordering products and acquiring data. Easier reporting for the operators and for the lab. Just take the snail and get rid of it and make it a cheetah.
The next step in the process was the fishbone analysis. This leads you to your problem statements. Once you have your problem statements, we completed the 5 whys to get to the root cause of each problem. We then came up with experiments and expected outcomes to try and amend the root causes of each problem statement.
So one of the main objectives of what we were trying to do here this week was to figure out of all the work that the Water Quality Lab does, how much of it is truly impactful to the end user, and is that analysis actually tied to a customer using that data. What we found out, removing the regulatory component there, is that in this event, 31% of the work that we do with the Water Quality Lab is relevant to water treatment and environmental compliance. We're going to continue that endeavor to hopefully shoot that number up quite a bit. But what we identified through that is possibly some analyses where the work is no longer needed to be done. There's going to need to be more extensive vetting to figure out whether or not just because water treatment isn't using it does not mean that they are the only potential customer of that data. Another piece of what we did this week, trying to do the inch wide, mile deep idea here, is we identified TOC as one of the pieces of data where our treatment plants could make real-time operational decisions. And so we want to work out a system where we can better notify our treatment plants when that data is available. We want to model it off of blow-offs and what we use for construction work there. We've also identified possibly a couple efficiencies by changing the process in TOC sampling. Our intention is to have alkalinities ran by plant operators at the time of collection there, rather than have that potential bottleneck in the lab later down the road. So hopefully that'll give us some same week possible changes and allow our plants a little bit better real-time data.
Treatment staff has been working with the Water Quality Lab as well as purchasing to get rid of some of those, to not order our materials directly through the lab. And so that's been an ongoing process for the last year. And it's been going really smoothly, but one thing that we identified in this process, in this RIE, was that there's still some legacy issues that we are receiving from the lab. One of those, the biggest concern is our nitric acid. So the Water Quality Lab receives nitric acid, they dilute it, they also use it for their process, but then they dilute it and deliver it to the different treatment plants. And we use it in-house for cleaning. One thing we've noticed, they noticed at the lab, is that that's a process chemical that they need. And so sometimes we get short staff at the treatment plants and pull from their stock, and that can cause a problem. But really the critical issue is that we've eliminated that movement, which is a safety issue because nitric acid is a dangerous chemical. So that way we just get it shipped and delivered directly to the treatment plants. We get it at the dilution that we have, and we just use it automatically. It's much faster. The other things we've used are TOC vials, Nalgene containers, labels, and anything else. So going forward, the treatment plant staff is just going to order that directly from the suppliers ourselves, and we've sent out some SOPs to handle that.
Presented are tools that we've developed as part of this RIE that get us to our future state. But on the top right corner is LabNet, and I just want to say I've been a part of a couple of these RIEs, and this is one tool that really on a personal level will help tremendously. What happened is the lab keeps their data in their own database, Laboratory Information Management System called LIMS, and we at the treatment plants don't have access to it. So we get a lot of data requests. Hey, have you ever looked at TSS? Or consultants, and I didn't have the ability to access their data. And it sounded kind of simple. I mean, I've been thinking about this since 2009. How come I just can't see their data? They take a lot of it, but I would typically have to make a request to get it. What we've done as part of this event is on the water quality inflow page, we've added a link to LabNet, which shares and gives everyone access at the treatment plants the Water Quality Lab's data. So you can search for Marston, Foothills, and get the data at your hands. This will eliminate a lot of the requests the lab gets and save time for them. In addition, there's always been questions, what samples, where does the Water Quality Lab sample in our watershed? And a lot of times I was like, I think I know in Ralston, but it was, what about in Gross? Or what about, so on inflow, we've added links. So for the watershed, it's on your right-hand side, the map. It's an interactive map, so you can click on one of those sampling points and actually see what constituents they analyze for. Is it molybdenum, cadmium? You can also get the average and the count of samples they've taken. So it's interactive, but it's very user-friendly. And there's also, we provided a link, eMaps, and this is showing the distribution system on the left-hand side and all the sampling points in our distribution system. So if I wanted to know what the DBPs were, I could find it, whereas before I would have had to call the Water Quality Lab, and I could click on it. It's just as interactive. You can also use eMaps for the watershed, and the eMap one just shows Denver Water's attributes, such as the reservoir conduits. It might have you narrow in exactly the area that you're looking at. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, this was a pain point that was identified, just the requests. In the previous time, I would call the Water Quality Lab. Sometimes I'd try Craig, I'd try Rhonda. Somebody might have left a message for both of them on a request that they need. Now they've moved to Workfront, and this is going to really streamline their whole process of handling requests. And if somebody's out, they can send it to somebody else. They have a date, timestamp, and it'll be a lot more efficient way for scheduling, planning, or work. So through these tools that were created as part of this RIE, it's going to become more efficient in how we all do business and share information. One other thing that got added on that was part of the engineering RIE was process flow diagrams at each of the treatment plants, which show the sampling points in LIMS and the name of them. So on that inflow page, and I encourage everybody, go to the water quality inflow page. It has some really good information, and we'll continue to add more. But you can click on each plant and get the process flow diagram and know exactly what their sampling point is. So that's just as valuable. So I feel like we have the watershed, we have the plants, and now the distribution system, we're covered, and it gives people a lot of knowledge.
As a follow-up to accessing data, it is important to know that these tools even exist. If you don't know the tools are out there, it still doesn't accomplish anything. So during the week, members of our team went to the water treatment plants, talked to the personnel there, and also talked to individuals with environmental compliance to let them know about these tools. In particular, we're talking about LabNet. And as a follow-up, there was a survey that was done by members of the team just to see, as they were able to use that tool, how useful it was. So the first question there is that information on LabNet useful to access data? And overwhelmingly, the response was yes. And then the second question, will LabNet allow you to find lab water quality data on your own? And as you can see, it was, again, overwhelmingly yes. And that is important because, as it was mentioned earlier, this cuts down on wasted time trying to call somebody from the lab to see if that data is available. If they're not there, if they're on vacation, when are you going to get it? But if you can get to the data on your own, that's very important and cuts down on wasted time.
So here are some numbers associated with where we are and where we're going. The customer satisfaction top box score of 28%, that is weighted from a 69% value initially that was rolled out with our VSA down to 28%, which is weighted towards treatment and environmental compliance. And so our target top box score from there will be 60%. As Myron showed you, we sent out a couple of surveys. We will continue to do that to drive that score up. The surveys, I think, will also help us refine our questions as to how we're meeting customer needs. So I'm looking forward to movement in this particular area. Data request time, that's 3.2 hours per week for somebody that works in the lab to hunt down, get, and deliver whatever it is that they're being asked for. Typically, this is in the form of some sort of data from some sample location in the form of some CSV or Excel file format, and then finally it is delivered out to the customer. Since we've implemented the Workfront workflow, we've gotten a touch time hour of 1.4 on a data request, and so something's working. Very encouraging there. Analysis tied to a customer, we do at least 40,000 pieces of work on average for somebody in Denver Water. The compliance part is pretty easy to suss out. We know that that's going to the state, but we do also have a lot of internal projects that we push forward to customers, and we can't really identify them. This week, we know that 31% of what we do is for treatment and environmental compliance. The capacity per project, as Andrea led on, we would get a phone call, maybe, or an email perhaps, or somebody knows somebody that knows somebody at the lab, and hey, I need this done. And so what happens is, if we're not in that planning process, we get to drop what we're doing and help the customer out. And so with the Workfront process there, we have a little bit more of a heads up, we have a little bit more of a flow, we get a little sooner to the table in the planning phase. So instead of taking 16 hours of our time to help the customer, we're seeing that drop pretty well. So sample turnaround time, we have a lot of data that's in backlog, and this needs an administrative task of actually reviewing the data to assess its validity, and then authorizing it, and then making it available for consumption by customers. This is going to be very important because LabNet, the access to our data is only authorized data. So if we have this many data points that aren't available, that's as many data points that aren't available to you as a customer. We have a very intense drive right now to get our sample turnaround time down to 10 days. And inside of that 10 days is actually a 3-day review period. And we are driving very hard to get our backlog down and to get a path forward so that we don't have any data outstanding greater than 80 hours. And then our training matrix score. This is something that we're tracking the professional skills of our staff. And so what we hope to do is we hope to increase the score, and that is going to be through skills such as project management, quality assurance, quality control, and data review, and good old-fashioned data management, and some laboratory operations.
So we have a couple items left to still work on here. The plant-specific treatability indices, we've made some good progress there. It'll probably take a little bit of tweaking, a little bit of work to figure out how to make it jive with what we're providing with LabNet and how to utilize those. I'm sure there's a learning curve there. The automatic TOC notification, we have the framework in place with blow-offs currently. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. It should be a pretty quick turnaround to get that in place. And then just getting the inflow and Workfront updates in place. With inflow, as Andrea kind of detailed there, we have some additional links that we want to add there. Those project plans specific for when, where, why we do things at the plants, watershed, distribution system, what have you. The process flow diagrams, and also those links for the GIS and the EMAP.
So at the end of our week, we decided to do some insights, and 3 of the insights, they all 3 different categories were what did we learn, how did we feel, and what did we take away. It was really obvious that the Water Quality Lab wanted to move forward, sharing data and helping their customers better. A lot of the things we did here with LabNet, workflow, and all the other information, it's going to make a big difference in how they serve our customers. It's also going to make a big difference in their customers asking them questions. The less time we have to do workflows, request data, the more time we can get it on our own, the more capacity the lab has. Water quality, water treatment, and Josh's group, environmental compliance, learned a lot about the samples that they took and how they thought the lab was doing samples for them. The water treatment department was doing samples, but a lot of the samples they took were their own and they were specific to them. The plants may not be the customer of the data they collected. So there's a lot of data that the Water Quality Lab collects that the plants don't use and don't need, but there is some that's there. A lot of the feelings, we are all optimistic about the future collaboration with water quality. Our takeaways were based on values. Excellence took the initiative to ask some difficult questions and why we can make things better and how those standards are held. Vision, long-term perspective, innovation, and use of technology. Overall, the whole week really nailed down issues that we wanted to find and correct.
Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am. We had an agreement that we betrayed each other at the beginning of this presentation to not use acronyms. TOC is total organic carbon, and it's a parameter that's measured by the treatment plans for compliance purposes. Good question. Yes, sir. Pardon? Compliance and process control monitoring. Yes, sir.
So you talked about the backlog of getting data up to the point that it can be consumed. What's your target for getting at least down to the 10-day time frame? You're currently at 21?
We're currently at 21, depends on how you break out the data right now. But our current target state is by September 15th, we will have our data down to no longer than 10 business days. And September 20th, for contract data, all the backlog there shall be down, or you'll never see me alive again.
Are there any additional resources to support you need to get to that? You already know what that is.
Right now, we do have a new staff, and so some of the experience levels are lower, but we are distributing that work to them. And so we're expecting to see some boost in their data authorization skills. It can be tedious, but we're kind of dividing and conquering in-house right now. Okay. Hang on.
Why did you decide on Workfront as opposed to, for example, Maximo?
We picked Workfront because we've had great experience with it with our applications team. We can just simply from a device start an email, get it into the Workfront. I could check statuses. I can accept work. I can decline work. We can do it from our workstations. We could move very quickly through that. There's been discussion of pushing that workflow to Maximo, and currently right now, you got to be at a workstation, logged in, looking for it. We don't really have capacity for what would be classically known as a planner scheduler, which typically I've associated with Maximo workflow quite a bit. So what we're looking for really, higher picture, is what is the tool for customers to get a hold of us to request work so that we can deliver. And once we get our specifications down, such as we need to move quickly, we need to have access, we need to be able to track metrics or whatever, I don't think we really care if it's Workfront or Maximo or Brand X or whatever. So at this point in time, it's getting us away from the inbox and the voicemails and the Post-it notes into something trackable that can do the metrics for us through a couple of conditions that are in there. Yes, sir.
So did you guys identify any data that we collected that's not even viewed or used?
For some reason, we collect 2 alkalinity samples during one visit every month at the plant. And that's because we have a couple of schedule snafus that are in there. Also, we calculate hardness data through another analytical method, and we titrate for hardness data. So we're doing a couple of duplicate things in there that really don't have much value. So we have found a few pieces of juicy fruit that are low enough for us to kind of knock off the limb so that we can just quit doing some things. As exciting as that sounds, we want to understand how all of this is connected. And so before we just start making sweeping changes of not doing things, we're going to look at that very closely. But immediately, one of the biggest bangs for the buck that we're going to get is the lab will bring back an alkalinity sample to analyze, which is critical for the total organic carbon report. We could do that at the plant. When the lab gets back with those TOC data samples that are in there, the alkalinity is already done, and then we just simply run 2 additional analyses, and we can probably shave maybe 48 hours off of delivery to the customer. So we found a few things. Further questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, does anyone have access to the LIMS data? I forget already.
LabNet, as we speak, right now. Yeah.
You can easily export it to Excel, so it's really pretty easy.
Is that, I'm curious, that's not LIMS, I don't think, right? So
It is pointing at LIMS, right? And so as soon as a bit of data is authorized, it wakes up and it is available, viewable through LabNet. And so you can see that if you're waiting for me to authorize data and you're banging on my door, where is it? Give me a second. When it's authorized, let the server refresh a couple of minutes. That data will be there. So LabNet is as live as possible lab data that we can get. I think it's simply a matter of technology. Yes, it would. I would like that. Yeah. Further questions? All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much and have a great holiday weekend.